and hopefully we'll come up with something that's going to be really terrific.
And the weather affecting the plans to sell health care here at the White House. The president was expecting to have over members of the Freedom Caucus tonight to the Eisenhower Executive Office building, Shannon, for a little bowling, pizza, and some friendly arm twisting on health care. But because of all the snow that we've got here at the White House, that's going to have to wait until later on this week. Shannon?
That must be the most fun thing that got canceled in Washington, D.C., as you're dealing with all the cancellations there. All right. Now on to another story the White House is dealing with, the wiretapping story. Sounds like they're changing their position a little bit on this.
The press secretary yesterday modified the position that the White House is taking on all of this just slightly. And the White House, by the way, hasn't been saying much on it. But the press secretary yesterday saying when the president initially set out his tweet about 10 or 11 days ago, the words wiretapping were in quotes, which the press secretary said could mean, well, not just wiretapping. He doesn't think that President Obama necessarily came up and put a tap on his phone, but it could refer to any one of a number of surveillance techniques, not just bugging somebody's phone. Though the president did send out 2 subsequent tweets to that one where the word tapping and tap, which was spelled T-A-P-P, was not in quotes. So we haven't yet heard from the president, Shannon, on exactly what he meant. He's been asked the question a number of times and continues to ignore the question every time it's asked. Maybe we'll get an answer one of these days, Shannon.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're going to stop asking. All right, John Roberts live at the White House. Thank you.
Also, DVR alert for the week. President Trump goes one-on-one with Tucker Carlson, 9 o'clock Wednesday night, only here on the Fox News channel. Going to be a really interesting interview, too, when Tucker and the president meet up in Michigan. So stay tuned for that.
I'm guessing Tucker may ask about the wiretapping. We'll see if we get a direct answer there. All right, well, coming up, House Speaker Paul Ryan says the CBO report, it's a little bit different than you may have heard about it. And he says it proves Republicans are on the right track.
If you read this entire report, I'm pretty encouraged by it, and it actually exceeded my expectations. This is just part 1 of a 3-part plan, and that's why I'm excited. Just this, they say, lowers premiums, stabilizes the market, gives people more choice and freedom.
But do the numbers tell the whole story? House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy is going to join us live to break it all down.
Also, it is called the Mar-a-Lago Summit. President Trump is expected to meet with the Chinese premier next month. Will the two see eye to eye on the critical issue that is North Korea? Stay tuned on that.
And their Hillary Clinton campaign now hitting back on claims that officials linked to her campaign also met with Russia's ambassador. And aide to Vladimir Putin says, this is his version of it.
If you look at it with intention to demonize Russia, you would probably see that, yes, he was trying to interfere in Hillary's activities. But it would be nonsense, because this is not true.
No. This, compared to the status quo, is far better. I'm excited about this analysis. And yeah, I think they sort of overestimate the uninsured number, just like they overestimated who would be insured by Obamacare. But I do believe that if we're not going to force people to buy something they don't want to buy, they won't buy it. And that's kind of obvious.
So House Speaker Paul Ryan saying on balance that CBO report is positive. It estimates 24 million fewer Americans would have health insurance over the next 10 years if this plan were to pass. But it would also reduce the deficit by as much as $337 billion over 10 years, and that, folks, is real money. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy from the snowy Washington, D.C. How you doing, sir? And good morning.
I'm doing well.
To you. If you put this to a vote now, would it pass?
In the House, I believe it would, and this is why. There's other elements you have not seen. Now, remember, it has been put to a vote in 2 committees, and every Republican has voted for it. And in those committees is a microcosm of our conference, from Freedom Caucus to Tuesday Group, because they see that even in the CBO numbers, what does it do? It lowers premiums. And remember, the CBO can only score what's in front of them. And as I've said many times before, this is one of 3 phases. So they're not even able to look at what the 2nd and 3rd phase does.
Well, if it were able to pass today, why not put it to a vote? Just do it and get it over with.
Because we go through regular order. We're going through both committees. Now we'll go through Budget Committee, and then we'll go to Rules Committee, and then we'll bring it to the floor. Because we don't want to play any games. We want to do exactly as the structure says we're supposed to, and that's what we're doing.
So we are debating the CBO report from yesterday.
Yes.
Newt Gingrich said this last night with Martha about whether or not the CBO is onto something or not. Watch.
They should abolish the Congressional Budget Office. It is corrupt. It is dishonest. It was totally wrong on Obamacare by huge, huge margins. I don't trust a single word they have published, and I don't believe them.
Do you believe them? Do you? trust it?
Look, I go through CBO on all the different parts. I know when they're doing further projections, when they're doing about people's reactions. They're good on numbers of dollars, but when they have to guess about how people would react to it, that's a very difficult thing to do. So let's look at what they say about dollars. Premiums will go down 10%. You'll save more than $800 billion in taxes, and that's why you're seeing small business confidence rise today. You're also going to lower the deficit by more than $300 billion. And that's without looking at phase 2 and phase 3. Look, yes, we repeal the individual mandate. So are people right now having insurance because they're forced to and they don't want to have it? Yes. Can we sustain the current projection that we're on? No, because the exchanges have collapsed. 1/3 of this of all the counties only have one option. And then you have Medicaid, which in 10 years is going to cost $1 trillion. That's equal to the entire amount we use on discretionary spending, from the military to agriculture to every department in government. So, you know, that's unsustainable.
Let me try and squeeze in 2 more things here. Tom Cotton says that this 3-phase thing is a myth.
Well, I don't see that being a myth at all, because we have to go through reconciliation. If we wanted to just repeal and try to get 60 votes and wait for the Democrats to get 8 of them to come and join us, that bill would look a lot like Obamacare. This is Obamacare gone. We repeal it and repeal the taxes, and we actually make a system that works and lowers premiums. That's what the CBO says.
Yeah, okay, last point here. The argument that Paul Ryan and others are making is that fewer people have insurance because fewer people are forced to buy insurance. Is that a tough argument to sell?
No, it's not. In the Constitution, does it say you have to have insurance in America? No. But what we do is, today people have insurance that have deductibles up to $5,000. The premiums have continued to rise, so they spend all this money because they're forced to, because they're going to be penalized by the IRS if they don't buy it, and then they can't even use it because they can't afford to use it. Why don't we create a healthcare system that's not one size fits all, that actually gives people choice, that they decide the healthcare they want, that they have different options, and that it costs less? That is what this plan does, and it takes 3 phases to put it into fruition.
I appreciate you coming in today. Sounds a little empty down there.
Well, the planes aren't coming in, so we're out of session today, but I'm still here working.
No question. Thanks for making time for us today. Kevin McCarthy there from the Hill. Thank you, sir.
The sledding on Capitol Hill, though, very cool experience.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, the latest version of President Trump's travel order set to take effect later this week. There is a growing number of states now trying to put a stop to it.
Also, another executive order aiming to cut the fat in the federal government. How the president plans to cut back on all that extra spending.
Today there is duplication and redundancy everywhere. Billions and billions of dollars are being wasted on activities that are not delivering results for hardworking American taxpayers, and not even coming close.
President Trump launching a brand new plan to cut costs across the federal government. The president signing an executive order yesterday that allows his budget chief to look into different departments and figure out where money can be saved.
This order requires a thorough examination of every executive department and agency to see where money is being wasted, how services can be improved, and whether programs are truly serving American citizens. We want to empower them to make their agencies as lean and effective as possible, and they know how to do it.
Joining me now, Melissa Francis, co-host of After the Bell on Fox Business Network, among many other things. Good to see you this morning. You made it. You made it in.
Absolutely, piece of cake.
Okay, so the president is talking about making these cuts. One of the worst kept secrets in D.C., of course, is that people don't want to spend less than their budget because they're worried about getting less for the next year. We know there's plenty of waste in there, but no one's really done a good job at cracking down.
That is absolutely true. And it's so funny. I know people are getting sick of hearing this. The president is a businessman, but the president is a businessman. And when a new CEO takes over a company, it is very common to turn to all the departments and say, instantly, I want you to cut 10%. Now, managers know this, and head of departments in D.C. certainly know this. They know exactly where the waste is and has been. And it's not that they're bad people and they didn't want to cut it before. But like you said, if you give up any room in your budget, you don't get that back. So he's saying, I'm forcing everyone to cut 10%. The good news is that when you expand again, you know exactly where you want to hire. You know exactly what the needs are. You'd spend the money the second time around on technology instead of redundancy. So it's very healthy. I know it makes people nervous. And the second and third cut, yes, down the road you start cutting into the bone. But right away, I mean, you're skimming the fat off the top. Everybody, if you think about where you work, you can identify something that is being wasted. Think about your home. I mean, when you need to cut the budget, the first thing you do is you say, let me see everyone's cell phone bill. Or, wait a second, why are we spending so much on energy? Are we leaving the, a door open and a window open? What is this? You can find places the first time around. It's after that it gets tough.
How much of this do you think will happen maybe through workplace atrophy, just not filling positions that don't need to be filled?
That's true. I mean, that's a piece of it, because you probably have some open positions in these departments, but I don't think he'll let it linger that long. I mean, I think that they'll have to make something meaningful pretty much out of the gate. But this is exactly what he's always good at, and I don't think that people should be surprised when they see this come along. I mean, one of my favorite quotes from early on was when Speaker Paul Ryan said he was blown away that President Trump looked at a defense budget and just the speed and granularity with which he was able to go through and slash. I think department heads know he's going to make an example out of someone.
Yeah,
I mean, if they don't do it, he's going to grab a budget and say, you know what, let me do it for you.
Let me help you.
Yeah.
And because so many people are entrenched in their programs, their employees, their, as you said, the fat that's involved in a lot of these agencies, maybe an objective eye is the better way to come in. We know OMB Director Mick Mulvaney is going to be overseeing this process. In the meantime, we're going to get the president's budget this week as well, and a lot of people say that's also going to be aimed at shrinking the federal government.
I think it absolutely is, and if you think about what he's trying to do, he's sitting in Washington saying, I want to shrink Washington. That's not a message that's going to be well received by anyone there. I mean, it was amazing. We've talked about this before. Last time I was down there, just to see the real estate boom, when the rest of the country goes through booms and busts, and Washington doesn't. That's not right. That's not fair. That's the money coming in from the middle of the country, from working people who are working so hard and are struggling with their health insurance bills, their mortgages, their family, their rent. And instead, D.C., year after year, they vote themselves raises. Everything gets bigger and bigger and bigger. He knows that he was elected by the people outside to come into Washington and finally cut some of that. That puts him at odds with almost everyone in Washington, but I don't think he's afraid of the fight.
No, I don't think so either. And you mentioned everyone in Washington. We're hearing folks on both sides of the aisle say, oh, the budget we think we're going to get from him is going to go too far. But again,
right, of course,
that's Washington as usual.
Exactly. So. You know it well.
All right, Ms. Francis, good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Bill?
Shannon, thank you. Powerful winter storm shifting a little bit right now, slamming the Northeast, and the impacts being felt by travelers around the country. They've canceled hundreds, if not thousands, of flights today, so we'll have the latest on that storm. Also, spokesman at the Kremlin claims the Russian ambassador meets with just about everyone in Washington, D.C., including Hillary Clinton's team. Our panel takes that on in a moment.
This is what is being performed by every ambassador of Russia abroad, every ambassador of the United States abroad, including in Moscow. The more ambassador talks to people in his country of residence, the better job he does.
So here we go again. Fox News alert now. Late winter storm pounding the East Coast. Some areas could get more than 2 feet of snow, and it looks like New York City might have dodged the worst of it. We fired up the Fox News deck over to Shepard to find out what you're seeing out there and over there. What's up, my friend?
Well, it's not a blizzard, my friend. The National Weather Service said it was going to be, but it is not. The storm moved a little bit. Still, it's snowing from Washington through Baltimore, Philly, up the Jersey Shore, into the big city, out on Long Island, all across New England. D.C., just a couple of hours to go on this. Boston, it's going to be a long night. Here's what we're looking at outside 1211 Avenue of the Americas, Rockefeller Center, Radio City Music Hall. Our plow guys from Rock Center working hard down there. Normally be thousands of people on the streets, not this morning. Officially just a little more than 4 inches in Central Park right now. I want to show you what we're expecting for cities up and down the East Coast. A map of what's still to come. Remember yesterday they said 2 feet for New York City? That's not going to happen. We're expecting 2 to 4 more inches in New York City as it snows into the late afternoon. Albany a good bit more. Up in the Poconos, still a couple of feet possible. Philadelphia, you've got another 2 to 4 inches coming. Washington, D.C., another 1 to 2 inches. Government offices delayed opening by about 3 hours today. Up in Boston, the snow's really just getting started. Out on the islands, Cape Cod and the rest, just an inch or 2. Up there in Boston, 6 to 10 more north and west. And north and west has kind of been the key so far. North and west of all the big cities is where everything is going. You can see the track this is taken. The red areas are a blizzard warning. New York City was in that. So was the Jersey Shore. But alas, All of that is now canceled. We're still going to get a lot of snow. It's still going to be a miserable day, and the wind gusts are going to be a problem. Atlantic City with a 41-mile-an-hour wind gust, 28 in New York, out in Montauk, last stop Montauk on the Long Island Railroad, 32 miles an hour, and out in Nantucket and Hyannis, just about 30 and 25-mile-an-hour wind gusts. I want to show you a live look before we go over there. This is LaGuardia Airport. Flights are not delayed by much this morning because mainly there are no flights. 85% of all flights into and out of New York City canceled today. 2,800 canceled across the area. 5,000 across the East Coast. 7,700 canceled over the course of this week so far. But there's still time out on Staten Island to ride the snowboard. Can you guys play this video? This guy's been riding on a snowboard. This is a video. There you go. This is behind a car on Staten Island, only on Staten Island, but a great sky cam I want to show you. This is a bald eagle in Hanover, Pennsylvania. This is a live picture. First time this bald eagle has seen snow, I bet you. There's an egg under there. She's not all that pleased. To be very pleased, it would take a move to Miami Beach. From our friends at the news station, WSVN 7, Biscayne Bay, right along the 79th Street Causeway, 72 degrees in Miami, going up to 82, and we hate you. Bill, it's going to be a long one on the East Coast.
We'll be there eventually, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm seeing some pictures from like Western Maryland and Virginia. I mean, they've taken a lot of snow. I mean, they were socked in areas, but maybe we got the best of it.
We did.
By the way, things are back to normal. Coffee shop's open.
Yes, oh, thank God.
See you, shop.
All right.
30 minutes away.
Claims of campaign contacts meeting with Russian officials are resurfacing again. But this time, the Kremlin claims it was members of Hillary Clinton's team that met with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. This as Democrats continue to attack Attorney General Jeff Sessions for his own meetings with the ambassador, which he says were in his role as a U.S. senator. The Russian spokesman says it was the ambassador's job, it still is, to meet with all kinds of U.S. leaders regardless of party.
If you look at some people connected with Hillary Clinton during her campaign, you would probably see that he had lots of meetings of that kind. But there were no meetings about electoral process.
Joining me now to talk about it, Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, and Pablo Manriquez, a former DNC staffer and co-founder of K Street Media. Good to see you both.
Hi there. Good morning, Shannon.
All right, Pablo, that was a pretty broad statement there by, what was his name? Dmitry Peskov. It was a pretty broad statement by him because he talked about the fact that, hey, probably some people connected to her met with him. You know, we saw people take this on, and right away, Nancy Pelosi, Claire McCaskill, folks on the Hill, picture surface of them with the guy. There are a lot of people on Capitol Hill who supported Hillary Clinton. Is it going to be tough for them when a picture pops up that shows, listen, this is just the course of business. It happens. They met.
Well, I think that the thing to keep in mind here isn't that there were meetings or not meetings, that with regards to Jeff Sessions in particular, the problem is that he failed to disclose these meetings. So nobody's denying that it's a Russian ambassador's job to meet with people and that senators meet with Russians. But when Jeff Sessions was asked about this under oath, he did not disclose it. Now, I think that
in your estimation, could it have been an innocent oversight or mistake? Because he's clarified it. He's filed new paperwork with the Senate Judiciary Committee and those that were doing the hearing. Just like Nancy Pelosi and Claire McCaskill said, they never met with him.
Well, I mean,
is it possible?
I think that right now, I think that one of the places where we're not going to have a lot of fair and balance or any credibility whatsoever is from a press conference by the Kremlin. Like none of this about Hillary's meeting or the alleged Hillary campaign's meetings with the Russian officials has been substantiated. I think that what we will find out on March 20th, though, when the House Intelligence Committee brings the intelligence chiefs to speak to this, we're going to have a lot more sort of clarification on what went on and why. But as I said before, if meeting with the Russian ambassadors alone was a crime, then half of the Donald Trump presidency, half of the Donald Trump White House would be in jail. But it's not. Failing to disclose those meetings is where we find a lot of suspicion.
Rich, I want to bring you in. Here's what Nick Merrill said on behalf of Hillary Clinton. It's not true, which is why they're using the word probably is my guess. But again, not uncommonplace that people in Washington would meet with this ambassador. And there were a lot of people in Washington who supported Hillary Clinton.
Correct. Well, I doubt that the Russian ambassador was meeting with the Clinton campaign when, you know, there was a DNC hack and the whole issue of Russia was a very hot one and a live one during the election. But as a general matter, of course the ambassador meets with everyone. He's a famous schmoozer. Everyone in Washington apparently knows this guy. You have Democrat officials who said they've never met with him who actually did meet with him. And there's nothing necessarily sinister about meeting with the Russian ambassador, except for there's this haze of suspicion about whether the Trump campaign was allegedly colluding with the Russians during the campaign or not. And so far, there is zero evidence of that. You have the former director of the DNI a weekend or two ago, James Clapper, saying he saw zero evidence of that.
Well, Rich, I'm guessing, though, that you agree with Pablo, which is always nice when you can agree about something, that you don't want to be taking a lot of credibility from Kremlin spokespersons.
Of course not. No, I mean, they lie all the time. It's a heinous, repressive government, and we shouldn't believe a word they say. And in general, on this whole Russian matter, whether it was the allegations of collusion, which there's no evidence of yet, or whether it's the leaks that have come out against Michael Flynn and others, let's get all the facts on the table. Let's have a full and thorough and real investigation on Capitol Hill, and I'm hoping that happens.
Yeah, and there are multiple tracks. There are multiple tracks to that, Pablo. And you mentioned next Monday we're going to hear in front of the House Intelligence Committee from a lot of folks connected to this. Does that give you reassurance that this will be handled properly?
I mean, I think that right now we need to let the process play out. But when letting the process play out, we do need to remember that Donald Trump was on stage at campaign events for months, calling to Julian Assange and calling to WikiLeaks to release more, to hack more Hillary Clinton's emails or Hillary Clinton's campaign emails. This was something that he wanted leaks. He was celebrating leaks. He was the principal carnival barker for leaks in the American political spectrum. And now, of course, you know, he has a big problem with leaks. But the overall...
And the White House is making a distinction between emails that somebody answered a phishing scam that's Gmail versus leaking national intelligence information. Those are very different things. We wait to see where this turns out. And again, no evidence of any collusion yet. We'll stand by. Rich and Pablo, good to see you both.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon.
So after slamming China on trade, Fox News alert now on this. President Trump said to be planning to host the Chinese premier in Florida. Ambassador John Bolton in a moment on the critical issue before both men and their countries.
Plus, will the CBO report become a hurdle for Republicans as they try to repeal and replace in the plan that they have for Obamacare? Democrats now only stepping up their opposition.
This bill shatters those promises, and it delivers a massive tax cut to the wealthiest. I mean, it's a mockery to even call this a health care bill.
So now you remember President Trump fiercely critical of China on the campaign trail. Now he's said to be planning to meet with China's premier next month in Florida. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson heading to Beijing to work on details on that. John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor live in Dallas today. He escaped the storm on the East Coast. Sir, good morning. Thank you for your time.
Good morning.
Explain a cultural issue to us first. Is it important that President Trump meets the Chinese premier in Florida at Mar-a-Lago because that is the same setting and environment where he met the Japanese prime minister back in February?
Well, I think it is a kind of cultural touch. I think the president was interested in the case of Prime Minister Abe in establishing a personal relationship with a close American ally, although one we have some trade issues with. And I think he sees the same opportunity with Xi Jinping, with whom we have lots of difficult issues. I think this is something when if you consider Mar-a-Lago the southern White House, it's like George W. Bush taking people to his ranch in Texas, or sometimes presidents invite foreign leaders to Camp David. It's an informal setting where you can have a little bit more intimate conversation.
Culturally speaking, symbolically, does it put them on the same level, I guess, is the question I'm driving at there.
Yeah, well, it's close, although Abe was first, and I think that's the right order, too.
Okay. You mentioned the difficult issues. I would guess the first one is North Korea. Do you agree with that or not?
Well, I do, both because of the significant threat that North Korea's nuclear weapons program poses and because of the belligerent tone the North Koreans have demonstrated firing ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan, the rhetoric that they've unleashed now against the South Koreans in the United States and our military exercises, and, of course, the political crisis in South Korea caused by the removal of the elected president, new elections coming in May. So it's a very dangerous time, and therefore one that...
Right, but you have had previous administrations trying to push China to do something similar with little to no effect. Do you believe President Trump will have greater influence, or does he meet the same wall?
Well, I think with respect to North Korea, the United States for 25 years has pursued a misguided policy of trying to get China to pressure North Korea to make an agreement with us in exchange for tangible economic benefits. And 25 years of diplomacy have brought us to the point where North Korea is very close to being able to hit targets in the United States with nuclear weapons. I think we need a different strategy. I don't think that obviously has produced a result, and year 26 of diplomacy that way isn't going to do it either. So I think the president really needs to impress on China. We want to see movement toward reunification of the Korean Peninsula. That's the only long-term answer.
What about all the arguments about the currency manipulation and trade, and how significant those issues were for candidate Trump?
Well, I think there's significant issues for the United States. Look, the argument to bring China into the World Trade Organization in 2000 was China will begin to conform to international norms because of its WTO obligations. And they have repeatedly violated their WTO obligations in terms of discriminating against foreign trade and investment. They've got some cozy deals with some big foreign investors, but it is a big issue, and I think Trump rightly focused on it, and I've got to believe he'll focus on it in these conversations when the two leaders meet.
Well, your name was in the hopper as a cabinet member in this administration. It did not go that way, but Rex Tillerson goes to Beijing later this week, and that will be an interesting and important meeting then. Thank you, sir, for your time today. John Bolton, live in Dallas, Texas. See you in person real soon. Thanks, Shannon.
Iraqi forces closing in on ISIS militants as they get closer to the goal of retaking the city of Mosul. General Jack Keane weighs in on what it means for that region and the bigger fight against the Islamic State.
Also, Shannon, how several states are rushing to challenge President Trump's newest travel order.
The state of Washington asking for a court hearing today as the state's attorney general continues his fight against the Trump administration's latest travel order. 5 other states joining Washington's challenge, with a hearing also scheduled in Hawaii tomorrow. Dan Springer is tracking it all live from Seattle. All right, Dan, when are we going to have the first court hearing?
You almost need a scorecard at home, Shannon, on this one. We know Wednesday will take place in Hawaii. We know court will take place Wednesday in Hawaii. The state of Washington seemed determined for a hearing today, but that won't happen. Judge James Robart said late Wednesday that there will be no hearing today, but he did order the White House lawyers to respond by 4 o'clock this afternoon to Washington's lawsuit. So it is possible that Washington ties Hawaii by also getting into court on Wednesday. Nothing really new in its motion to have the nationwide injunction remain in effect. The only difference is more states have joined the lawsuit, so economic damages look a little more impressive. In filing the Washington suit, the Attorney General writes, travelers from the Middle East spent $96 million in Washington, including more than $9 million in state and local tax revenue. California received 286,000 visitors from the Middle East who spent approximately $681 million, generating over $49 million in tax revenue. So that's one advantage to having multiple states sign on. The other, of course, is that those states get to share the cost of this litigation, which is certainly rising by the day. Shannon?
All right, so what are the expected chances of success for the Washington suit?
Well, the legal experts I've talked to say it's pretty much a toss-up. Legally, it may be a stretch to call this revised order almost identical to the first one, but it again could hinge on President Trump's words before he was president. Candidate Trump said he would ban all Muslims from coming into the country, which would clearly be unconstitutional. Judges are not supposed to evaluate a candidate's comments when analyzing his actions in office, but that hasn't stopped the states from including those statements in their lawsuit.
There is simply no basis for the court to assume that because he said something as a candidate, that is the reason he's doing something as the president. And there's no historical basis for that.
So again, we are expecting the government to respond to Washington's lawsuit with their legal brief today, court tomorrow in Hawaii, perhaps court also in Washington State tomorrow. Shannon?
All right. Dan Springer, thank you very much.
So a House committee set a deadline for the claim of a Trump Tower wiretap. Well, that deadline's come and gone. So what the Justice Department is saying about that today, we'll update that story, and the battle to replace Obamacare. Republicans are drawing the line with each other. We'll talk to both sides in a moment here. House Majority Whip Steve Scalise will make his case. Then Freedom Caucus member David Brat will make his.
This is a Fox News alert. Mother Nature is not fooling around. Just days before the start of spring, unleashing a massive winter storm across the Northeast corridor. Plows are out in force with blizzard warnings up in many regions from New Jersey to Maine as this storm shifts to the west. Welcome to a brand new chilly hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Sheena Bream in for Martha McCallum, and the keyword inside.
Inside, indeed. Yes, I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning, everybody. Schools are closed, flight cancellations rippling across the country. That's kind of a big impact on travel. Here we go. Tens of millions asked to hunker down, stay off the roads in New York City. The blizzard warning has been lifted, but ice is still a major worry. The further inland you go, the thicker the snow, frankly. And Washington's getting a mix of snow and ice. Its worst storm of the season, making roads and highways slick. Shepard Smith live in the Fox News deck to track all of that. What are you seeing, my friend?
I see a lot of snow, Bill. Good morning. The National Weather Service predicted blizzard conditions for hours on end. 2 feet of snow in New York and Boston, and a foot in most of the big cities around. But alas, the storm took a turn. The temperature went up just a little. Warm air from the Atlantic came ashore. And it's not going to be so bad for the big cities. That said, inland, a couple of feet. Down the Jersey Shore, could be near that. Blizzard conditions are coming. Let's get over to the wall and show you what it looks like outside. The plows are still working. Not a lot of cabs on 6th Avenue and 48th Street in Midtown Manhattan. We'll get to the Weather Center for an explanation of why the storm took a turn. But again, this is Rockefeller Center right here in Tiny Town, USA. It's not as bad as we thought it would be. Another 4 hours, though, of snow ahead. You can see the flags at a pretty good clip because the wind is up there pretty strong. How much snow is in the forecast for the mid-Atlantic all the way up to New England? Let's start with Washington, D.C. right over here. D.C., it's going to be ending in about an hour for you. The updated forecast total 2 to 5 inches. Should be finished, about an hour. Much of the same in Baltimore, 3 to 6 inches. Along the Jersey Shore, down in South Jersey, 3 to 6 inches. 6 to 12 up in North Jersey near New York City. Look at these new pictures just into us from Atlantic City. This is from social media. Atlantic City police say that many of the streets are closed down. There's widespread flooding there. Atlantic City is going to have a rough day with this flooding. Nobody out and about in the coastal areas there. New York City, 2 feet. That was the prediction. That's not happening. Right now, more than 4 inches officially in Central Park. 6 inches over in Hell's Kitchen in the Bronx and at LaGuardia Airport. Getting sleet for a few minutes and then snow for a few minutes and then sleet again. And that should continue till about 2 or 3 o'clock this afternoon. Close to 10 inches before it's all over across the 5 boroughs of New York City. South shore of Long Island, not too bad, but north and west of the city, still big, up to 2 feet. Blizzard conditions there and in North Jersey. Wind gusts 50 miles an hour for many people inland. Expect power outages and, again, over 2 feet of snow for the interior and to the west here in up toward New England. Boston, just getting started, really. National Weather Service predicting 8 to 12 inches, just a couple of inches out on the Vineyard. So out on the islands, it's not going to be bad. But inland, Worcester, Amherst, Springfield, as much as 18 inches. So how much more is coming? Here are predictions for the rest of the day from the National Weather Service. 1 to 2 in D.C., 2 to 4 in Philly, Poconos, a couple of feet up there, but you get where you live. 2 to 4 in New York City, another 6 to 8 in Boston, 10 to 16 up in the Albany area. Adam Klotz is in the Extreme Weather Center. Adam, why this turn? What happened?
Well, Shepard, you know, these systems are all driven by upper-level winds, and when you're talking about such a large system in such a large area, just a couple of miles here or there can make a really big difference. So originally, perhaps this track was going to be a little farther out to sea. You see where this rain-snow line is. Instead of lining out just off the coast, it's ended up lining up, again, it just takes a couple of miles, but it's lined up along the coast. So all these major cities, you see it mentioning rain and snow, freezing rain, rain and snow. We've seen a lot of sleet here in New York. So areas that would have been pure snow snow and maybe piled up a little bit quicker. Well, yeah, that warmer air has shifted just a couple of miles. And really, it's true because you don't have to go much farther to the north to see very heavy snowfall, as you were just mentioning, as we are still looking at those blizzard warnings just barely to the north of New York City and farther up to the north. Here's your hour-by-hour forecast and really kind of taking you through the rest of the day. We are going to continue, at least in New York City, to hover along that line, so you aren't necessarily going to see those really big numbers, but it's just a little farther to the north where this is going to continue to pile up. Here you are at 5 p.m., so really the snow wrapping up throughout the evening hours and the overnight hours. That's when we'll be clearing off, and we'll be able to get an idea of maybe some of those numbers where they're really piling up a little bit further inland, Shep.
Adam Klotz from the Weather Center. We'll check in with him throughout the afternoon. Let's go out to the hinterlands. Rick Leventhal's Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, about 80 miles outside the city. It's like a winter wonderland there, Ricky.
Yeah, Shepard, we were on Long Island yesterday afternoon, and when we heard that the storm was shifting to the north and the west, we drove here to the Lehigh Valley in eastern Pennsylvania, where it started snowing just after 9 o'clock last night. It's been snowing all night long. Blizzard warning remains in effect here in the Lehigh Valley, and they tell us that the snow could come down 2 to 3 inches an hour through this afternoon. It slowed down quite a bit in the last half hour or so. We are getting that sleet mixed with the snow right now, but the roads are in pretty bad shape. You see a Jeep there. We've seen some trucks and SUVs. I want to show you this truck down here with some city workers in the green jackets. They've been trying to dig this truck out from the snow as they were trying to clear that intersection as the plows come through. So even some of the bigger trucks are having issues out here. A snow emergency was declared by Bethlehem's mayor. That meant that everyone had to move their vehicles off of the main roads so that the plows could get through. We have heard some reports of vehicles disabled on the highways in Pennsylvania. They have a couple thousand plows out and 700 National Guard to help out across the state. But again, the situation here in historic Bethlehem, it is a beautiful picture, Shepard, but the town is virtually shut down.
Rick Leventhal, thank you, sir. You know, one of the great things in the big cities is they put the plows out early. Last night when I went home from work, the plows were already out in Greenwich Village. So there are not a lot of cars today. Schools are closed. Most offices are closed. So they're able to plow pretty regularly. This is outside our building. And I want to show you one little girl who was mighty happy this morning. Her name is Sophia. And she's just a tiny tot. She's our the main producer on this program's brand new daughter, less than a year old. And this is her first snow, little Sophia, I guess on the east side of Manhattan. Bill Hemmer, she's a cute little girl, just learned to walk, and now all kinds of snow.
There's time for that. She's beautiful, though. Well done.
Aww.
You know, some days, snow days are the best days in this city, by the way, too.
Love it.
You can do things that you can't just, walk down the middle of the street. It is no problem. Thank you, Shepard.
You betcha.
See you at 10:30. Don't go anywhere.
The Justice Department asking for more time to gather evidence related to President Trump's wiretap claim. The House Intelligence Committee now extending the deadline to March 20th. That's when the committee is scheduled to hold its first hearing, the open hearing on Russian meddling in the election. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington. All right, Catherine, the House Committee responded. How so?
Well, that's right, Shannon. After the Justice Department asked for more time, the House Intelligence Committee issued this statement. They want relevant documents before the public hearing on Capitol Hill this Monday. And it reads in part, quote, if the committee does not receive a response by then, the committee will ask for this information during the March 20th hearing and may resort to a compulsory process if our questions continue to go unanswered. We are told the Republican chairman is prepared to issue subpoenas. Over at the White House yesterday, spokesman Sean Spicer said the president's tweets from March 4th about surveillance were not meant literally.
The president was very clear in his tweet that it was, wiretapping. That spans a whole host of surveillance types of options. The House and the Senate Intelligence Committees will now look into that and provide a report back.
The first public hearing on Russia this coming Monday has invited current and former administration officials, including the FBI Director James Comey. Fox is told some of these witnesses have responded as to whether they will attend, but the committee is not making that information public yet, Shannon.
In the meantime, though, Catherine, isn't there a second request for these records over on the Senate side?
Well, that's right. Also last week, a bipartisan letter was sent by two members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island, and they sent their letter to a senior Justice Department official. These senators have oversight responsibilities because they lead a subcommittee on terrorism and crime. They also want documentation that either proves or discounts President Trump's claim before next week's public hearing.
I expect them to take some time, but Judiciary has control over the FBI, oversight. So I've said, okay, let's keep the committee process in place, regular order. So if the FBI runs over to the Intel committee and they testify there and they don't respond to my letter, I think that's a mistake because the FBI is under our jurisdiction.
So once again, really on the Senate and the House side, you see the FBI Director James Comey is really under the spotlight, to say the least. Shannon.
All right. We know you're watching every twist and turn. Catherine Herridge in Washington. Thanks.
So we know Republicans have reached a divide on Obamacare. Blow it up or replace it with another version. Two Republicans with two viewpoints. House Majority Whip Steve Scalise and David Brat from the House Freedom Caucus. They are set to make their case next. Stay tuned.
And could this be the Islamic State's last stand in Iraq's largest city? Have coalition troops finally got ISIS on the run?
Also, a filmmaker claiming he has new evidence that shows Michael Brown did not commit a robbery before his fatal shooting by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. He made his case in a fiery exchange with given Obamacare. Now, the CBO releasing its report on the House Republican plan for replacement. It estimates the American Health Care Act would reduce federal deficits by a whopping $337 billion over 10 years. That's real money. By 2026, an estimated 52 million would be without coverage compared to 28 million under Obamacare. Now, a big reason for that difference is that people are not forced to buy insurance under the Republican plan. First up today, Republican Congressman Dave Brat of Virginia, member of the House Freedom Caucus. And sir, good morning to you and thank you for your time. We're going to bring in another Republican in a moment here, and we'll contrast your two selling points in your arguments. So good morning to you.
Right.
Well,
hey, thanks, Bill.
What needs to change to get your vote?
Yeah, well, I taught economics for 20 years, and Trump, the biggest thing he's selling is shopping across state lines and bringing the price down. And so the big thing that has to happen is that all happens in bucket two. Bucket one only focuses on coverage of millions of people, et cetera. And so that's all good. But if you don't bring the price down, and so you mentioned in the remarks early, the major problem, you can choose your policy, but we have these essential health care benefits that are mandated by the federal government. So when you go to shop across state lines, you can only find kind of the old remaining socialist products. We got to change that. So if we put bucket two into law, that's the getting rid of the insurance regulations. Right now, when a young person goes out to buy a policy, they can't buy a cheap policy no matter what state they shop in because federal regulations are blocking it. And then my own state this morning in the newspaper, there's any state that expanded Medicaid coverage, it turns out it's going to get bonuses, right? And the fiscally responsible states like Virginia, which didn't do that, we're getting 87 million. If we would have expanded Medicaid, we'd get 3 billion. So there's an inequity, and all of this is being run by the federal government. That's the major problem I have. Every civilization throughout history declines and falls eventually because their federal government gets bloated by paying too much attention, as in Rome, with the cronies and the power elites and et cetera. Those are the only folks that want this thing, right? This big federally run thing.
Just listening to that, I mean, you're a long way off from being satisfied then, based on that answer.
Yeah, no, we want Trump to be a success. We're going to own this thing. And so we're saying, hey, the secretary says he can do a lot on the insurance regs. That could be true, but it won't become law. If the secretary does it, it'll last 4 years. We want these changes. We want free markets. That's what made this country great, right?
Yeah,
Trump wants to make us great again. That's
when you talk about President Trump, have you expressed this to him yet or not?
Yeah, he just wants to have a great bill, and so he's open to negotiating. We talked last week for one-on-one about 10, 15 minutes, got along great, we're laughing, and we differed on some of the little pieces because he thinks that the secretary can make these changes, and he can. And so the hard part is it's the permanency that matters. Right now, if we don't get that second block into law and the third block, the third bucket, we'll never see prices go down. All the price reductions you've seen in this current bill are due to getting rid of one insurance reg, the platinum, bronze, silver thing. That's what gives you a price reduction. And it's important, when we say price reductions, that's not a price reduction in your policy. That's a price reduction from Obamacare, centralized government policy pricing, which is going up 25%. So a 10% reduction from a 25% increase is still, you're going to get a 15% increase. It's
So
still high.
my
We're not
takeaway-
lowering the price.
My head's going to explode if we keep talking about numbers here.
Right.
Just give me a moment.
Right.
I appreciate your time. My takeaway from just listening to you talk is that you've got a long way to go before you're satisfied. So thank you. Stay in contact, and we'll see whether or not you get pushed further down the road. Okay, Dave Bratt, thank you in Virginia.
Hey, thanks, Bill. Steve's a great guy.
Well, here he is right now, House Majority Whip Steve Scalise for the other side. And sir, thank you for your time as well. You guys are
good to be with you.
You guys playing the basketball gym together, so I guess at some point maybe you can make the case. How would you talk him into buying your side of this argument now?
Well, one of the biggest concerns that Congressman Bratt has had, as a lot of our members have as well, is that, they were asking before the CBO score came out, is this bill going to lower the cost curve? Is this bill going to save money for premiums for families? Clearly, you can check that box because this bill, as it is confirmed by the Senate, is going to ultimately result in a 10% reduction in your premiums, and costs will continue to go down. That's not the beginning. That is literally when you see the ability for freedom in health care. Number one, you're seeing in their numbers that millions of Americans, 14 million people by CBO's estimate, say they don't want Obamacare. Right now, they're forced to get it. When we give them the choice, they say they would rather something better. This plan is a lot better because, number one, you get rid of a lot of these mandates. We zero out the individual mandate penalty, zero out the employer mandate penalty. CBO confirms, by the way, we cut taxes for families by over $800 billion and reduce the deficit. Those are two really big important factors because Obamacare is not just about higher premiums, which it is. It's also been a big job killer. We're going to be able to create a lot more jobs in our economy by getting rid of Obamacare. We're going to lower premiums for families, and we cut taxes, and we reduce the deficit. And that's just stage one of a three-stage process.
So just listening to Congressman Bratt's explanation there, I mean, he had a big, long list of things that he needed to get satisfied there. And now, without getting too deep in the weeds and all that, both sides are a long way from coming together to meet one another. If that's the case, is this something that goes on for weeks or for months, do you believe, today?
Well, we're really not that far apart when you look at the items that members have been bringing forward. We've been working closely with President Trump, who's been part of this negotiation, and he does that really well. If you look at the really big items that are remaining, they're very narrow. There are only a few, and we've got most agreement on the final pieces that we're trying to close out in these next few days. But this CBO score really does help because it confirms the big questions that most of our members had. Number one, will this plan lower premiums? Absolutely it does. Double-digit lowering of premiums, and that's just with stage one of a three-stage process. It gets even better when you look at what Secretary Price can do. Their other question was, will it reduce the deficit?
The president has said there will be a bloodbath in 2018 if this isn't passed through the House and Senate. I do believe that if we don't keep our word to the people who sent us here, Look, the most important thing for a person like myself who runs for office and tells the people we're asking to hire us, this is what I'll do if I get elected. And then if you don't do that, you're breaking your word.
That's House Speaker Paul Ryan on what he thinks could happen if Republicans cannot repeal and replace Obamacare. As some analysts predict an even bigger bloodbath if they actually do succeed because of the chaos a repeal might unleash. Dire predictions of higher costs and lost coverage for millions. Karl Rove is former White House Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Good morning, Karl.
Morning, Shannon.
I'm guessing so no snow, sleet, or blizzard down there in Texas. Good to have you.
No, come on south. It's nice and warm. Should I turn on the pool heater for you this afternoon?
Yes, and Bill wants to know when his pina colada is going to be ready also.
It's ready. It's cooling right now.
Okay, that aside, we do have some work to do. Now, we had on Congressman Mark Meadows last week from the Freedom Caucus talking about things that you had said. He responds, so we want to play that and give you a chance to respond to him.
If Karl Rove wants to bring out his whiteboard and we want to debate it back and forth on health care, I welcome that. You know, if Karl Rove wants to look at Tom Price's bill, he needs to look at Section 2 and Section 3 of the bill that I endorse. It repealed the mandates. It repealed the insurance mandates. It actually did what we're promising the American people. This is not Tom Price's bill. This is certainly not what we promised the American people. Karl Rove knows that. You know, this is smoke and mirrors when we suggest that we're going to dupe the American people.
All right, Karl, are you trying to dupe the American people?
Well, I think that's over the top. And look, I understand why he was a little upset, but let's go to the bills. If you and viewers can go to readthebillgop.com, and you will find there section 205, page 81. It zeroes out the individual mandate. Section 206, pages 81 and 82. Zeroes out the employer mandate. So it is in the bill. They basically kill these provisions, make them inapplicable in the bill that he's being asked to vote upon. And now we can argue about how you go about doing this. This does it in a way that allows you to pass it through the Senate with 51. The version that I suspect he favors would repeal the language from the law altogether, and that would require 60 votes in the Senate. If he thinks he's got 8 Democrats in his back pocket waiting to vote for this in the Senate, all he's got to do is tell us that. Now, the other part of the bill, which he never talked about at all, is he attacked in the current bill the idea of an advanceable refundable tax credit to help those who are self-employed or work in businesses that don't provide health care coverage to get coverage. He said it's a new entitlement. And my point was that in 2015, H.R. 2300 by then Congressman Tom Price had a advanceable tax credit in it. Title I, tax incentives for maintaining health insurance coverage. Section 101, refundable tax credit for health care and insurance coverage. This is the bill that Mark Meadows co-sponsored. He is listed on there as the 8th co-sponsor, the 9th name on this bill. If you want to find it, go to congress.gov, hit the legislation tab, hit the 114th Congress tab, and then enter in H.R. 2300, and you'll see that he endorsed a bill that called for advanceable refundable tax credits.
You've given folks a lot of homework. First of all, I want to know, is that one whiteboard, 2 sides, or 2 different whiteboards?
2 different whiteboards, and I got a third one right here ready for a different subject.
Before you get to that, you know that there are objections that, from the right saying, listen, it's a new entitlement. There's all kinds of money still flowing around that flows to people, tax breaks for people.
Right.
And then on the left, though, they're pointing to the CBO score saying 24 million people are going to be left without coverage. Now, you mentioned the Senate and trying to get this passed over there. It's critical they get those 51 votes.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've got folks like Senator Tom Cotton cautioning the House, saying, do not walk the plank for this. It won't pass in the Senate, and he's predicting a backlash in 2018 if the House does vote for this thing and it all falls apart. Your response?
Yeah. Well, look, I think he's right that there will be a backlash if we don't pass something. But it goes to show how fast a House member, when they go to the Senate, changes their mindset. When he was in the House, I think the last thing he'd want a senator telling him is the House has to write a bill that will pass the Senate. It's up to the Senate to figure out what bill will pass the Senate. The House will send over a bill. The Senate's not going to adopt it in that form. They're going to adopt a different bill. It's then going to go to conference, and the differences are going to be hashed out. But the idea that the House has a responsibility of passing a bill that meets the Senate's objections right from the get-go, that's unrealistic and unusual.
Well, he has been on both sides, so we'll see about his prediction about these bills. Carl Rove, good to see you and your whiteboards, plural.
Well, you bet.
Thanks for joining us.
Shannon.
Good stuff. Wow. The fight against radical Islamic terrorists could be taking a new strategy. Retired 4-star General Jack Keane will analyze what this means in a moment. Plus, there is this. News alert now on a tale of 2 cities. We have New York City screen left, and we have beautiful Miami, Florida screen right. The blizzard that was expected for New York did not hit the city, and it's not expected to. However, inland parts of Pennsylvania and Maryland and Virginia, and plus the storm up the East Coast into Massachusetts and Maine, it could still be a bit of a barn burner here, so we're not out of the woods by a long shot now. And a lot of snow still drifting around New York City. 30 degrees feels like 11, but in Miami, if you are so lucky, it's 72 degrees.
We are not so lucky.
Going up to a high of 82, Breen. But it's cloudy.
Well, you wouldn't want to spend all that time and money getting down there and just having clouds.
Does that make you feel better because it's cloudy? Or?
No.
No.
Worth a try, though.
There you have it.
This is the Fox News Alert. In the fight against terrorism, Iraqi forces have now completely surrounded ISIS in western Mosul. That's the last major stand of the Islamic State in Iraq. Officials say more than 60% of the territory has been taken back. The eastern side of Mosul was retaken from ISIS in January. John Huddy joins us live from Jerusalem with the very latest. All right, John, what is next in this fight?
Well, Shannon, Iraqi troops will continue the offensive and the advance into western Mosul as they gain more ground. Bad weather, though, has hampered some of the efforts over the last few days, or at least yesterday. There was wind, there was rain, there was low visibility, so that worked in ISIS's favor. But the advance has been fast, certainly faster than the offensive to retake eastern Mosul, which lasted 3 months. So that's a good thing. But the fight continues as we speak. You see some of the latest footage from western Mosul. There's an estimated 2,000 ISIS fighters that are basically holed up in the city. As you mentioned, they're surrounded. But not only are Iraqi troops dealing with, a densely populated area, urban combat, but an estimated 700,000 civilians that also remain in western Mosul and the old city as well of Mosul. And some of these streets are very narrow, so Shannon, it's difficult getting armored vehicles into some of these areas. But that said, both Iraqi and U.S. commanders say that the end of the battle is within range. There's no definitive time frame. But again, things are progressing as the battle continues as we speak, Shannon.
All right, John Huddy with the latest on that showdown. Thank you.
Significant story, too. For more on this, now I want to bring in General Jack Keane. And General, good morning to you, Chairman of the Institute of the Study of War. On Mosul, I guess eventually you win this fight. I think you would agree with that. But what comes after that, you believe, is just as important? Explain, sir.
It really is. Well, this is dense urban fighting, to be sure, as John mentioned in the intro here. It'll probably take a few more weeks to actually retake this in the rest of the city. But the political end state is as important as this military campaign. That if the Kurds and the Shias and the Sunnis are not enfranchised as part of a political unified government, there's likelihood we could still see a civil war here. So it is vital that this political unity come about. It's been camouflaged over because of the military campaign, and there's great divisions inside of Iraq. And another thing is coming. President Trump is going to have to decide how many troops is he going to leave in Iraq, or is he going to pull them all out, as Obama did in 2011. I suspect he's going to leave them. And leaving them is not just to help the Iraqi army, Bill. It's to have political and diplomatic influence on the government. It gives us leverage, and it reduces the influence of the Iranians.
So even after ISIS is defeated, you go back to the Sunni-Shia battle that's been raging for hundreds of years, you could say, whether it's in the open or whether it's concealed. General, I want to move to another story right now. Wall Street Journal is reporting this, a few other outlets today. Under President Obama, the CIA would locate a target under the drone program, but the U.S. military would carry out the actual attack. The Trump administration is considering putting this all under the review of the CIA. Do you like that idea, or from a military standpoint, what is the biggest change or distinction if you carry it out that way?
Well, through most of the 9/11 wars that obviously began right after 9/11, and we've been at it now 16 years, the CIA has been conducting drone strikes. Under the Obama administration, as you noted, though, they began to pull them away from the drone strikes and make it exclusively a military operation, relying on a central intelligence agency to collect intelligence and provide it to the military. Now going back to the CIA, I have no problem with it. I think the Trump administration is largely going back, not because one agency does it better than the other, but for this reason, because it's covert, it's classified, and it doesn't get discussed. When the military is conducting an operation, it's much more open, it's considerably more public. Now, that doesn't mean that these covert actions are not going to be reviewed, Bill. The Congress of the United States, representing the American people, have two committees, House and Senate Intelligence Committees, that are exposed to every single covert action the CIA takes in a classified manner. So the oversight will still be there. I think this is fine. This is about keeping it secret and doing it covertly and doing it in places we may not want to talk about.
Well, does it make it more effective? You know, the Obama team argued we want more transparency, and that's why they had the policy they did. If you go this route under Mike Pompeo, can you kill Islamic radicalism faster than you could otherwise?
I think the advantage it has is it stays covert. It'll be more effective staying covert. The military will still conduct drone strikes, Bill. They may actually be doing the largest number of them. But this will be special high-value targets and done in countries that we may not want to admit the fact that we have a presence there.
Understood. General, thank you so much. Jack Keane, 2 topics this morning. Thank you for coming in today.
Good talking to you, Bill.
Good to see you as well. Thanks.
Newly public surveillance video, one filmmaker using it to rekindle the controversy surrounding the shooting death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. But does the new video change the story about what happened? We're going to have a fair and balanced debate on that. A newly released video raising new questions about what happened in a convenience store before the deadly shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. Now, police had said one video showed him robbing the store. A documentary filmmaker now says a second video, this was shot 11 hours before that, shows Brown trading a bag of marijuana for cigars. The filmmaker insists it casts doubt on the police version of events, and anyone that thinks differently, well, you're just a racist.
He didn't rob the store, and anyone that sees the exchange that takes place with a conscience, a heart, 2 minds, and is not a bigot pretty much understands what happened. Unfortunately, there's some people in America with so much bias inside of them that they just want to think that Michael Brown is a bad guy.
Dana Lash is a nationally syndicated radio talk show host. Leslie Marshall is a syndicated radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor. Good to see you both.
Good morning. Thank you, Shannon.
All right, so people understand the earlier video, which shows some kind of conversation or exchange with Michael Brown, that's 11 hours before the second video, which the owner of the store says this is the one in which you see him taking something, and then they say strong-arming his way out of the store. So we know that there are 2 different videos we're talking about. Leslie, this is a video, both of these, that police have seen. The family has had these. Is the filmmaker now trying to be opportunistic in reigniting this fight? Because this video isn't new to the people who investigated, including the grand jury.
Well, yes, as you know, the grand jury was not presented with the video because it was really irrelevant to what was being looked at by the grand jury with regard to the officer and whether an indictment should be handed down, and that was the shooting. And the police officer did state that he stopped Michael Brown for walking in the middle of the street. I think it may, I don't think it's going to change anything, honestly, in the court of public opinion even. I think there are people who have their opinions very strong, whether it's for or against the police or Michael Brown, and I really don't see, honestly, even as a liberal Democrat, that this documentary would change anything. And I do agree that it just fans the flames that are not yet settled on this issue, and especially in that area and the divide between this community and the police.
And Dana, the attorney for the convenience store says that what happened was the video actually is edited in a way that he argues is deceptive. He says that this earlier video, 11 hours before the shooting, shows Michael Brown coming in with some merchandise, leaving something on the counter, and then turning around, returning all of the merchandise. He says that he was returning, the attorney says he was returning drinks and cigarettes, and that the folks in the store restocked the shelves and put them back. So there was something there, some kind of conversation that went on, but the attorney says there was no exchange. There's a hint that it was a drug deal. He says none of that happened. But the filmmaker behind this thing says basically, if you think you can watch these videos and not think that Michael Brown was wronged, then you are just a racist.
Yeah, that's insane. And I have to say, Shannon, I absolutely, I know this is like rare that this happens, but I actually agree with everything that Leslie just said. Leslie is absolutely right on this. I don't think that this documentary is, I know, we're like, did we just become best friends? I think we did. I know. But this documentary, it doesn't change anything. And I'm bewildered by the argument that this filmmaker, Jason Pollock, is trying to put out there. He's basically saying that, well, you know, he didn't go in and rob anyone. He's a drug dealer, so that makes it so much better. But really, there was no, still, even then, it's still theft because there was no cash exchange, and the store owners were saying that he still stole. This doesn't change anything. What happened, happened. It doesn't change the fact that he did try to attack and kill a cop with his own gun, according to 3 independent forensic investigations, and the fact that he had his fingerprints all in the trigger guard, and that the gunpowder residue that was found on his hand is consistent with someone trying to go and grab a gun in the position in which he was found to have done. It absolutely changes nothing. And it's sad to me because I feel like this is an opportunistic Michael Moore wannabe who wants to go in my city. My hometown is St. Louis. He wants to go and fan the flames further in my city, a city that has endured already so terribly much. Opportunists like this guy need to stop.
I mean, Leslie, do you think that's what this boils down to? Because we're talking about investigations headed up by a department that was led by Eric Holder at the time, and we have the grand jury findings, we have prosecutors, we have all of them saying that the version of events that is trying to be spun in favor of Michael Brown's just the DNA and the witnesses on site, it doesn't match up. Are they all racist as well? Do you think this guy's just, you know, trying to get attention?
Well, certainly anybody who's putting out a film, I was 20 minutes from Hollywood right here, ladies, and you know, yes, definitely anybody putting out a film wants to get attention. But at the same time, although there is evidence and there are decisions, there's a grieving, hurting family, and I can understand as a mother who feel that they don't have justice and want their day in court, and they feel that this documentary perhaps backs up their idea or version of events. And when I say that, what I mean is that there are still people out there that are not settled on this issue and are not comfortable with the lack of an indictment or the way things turned out, certainly because of the loss of life of this young man. So I don't think perhaps it's just that he's putting it out there for attention. I do think that there are people out there who support what he is doing and who welcome this being put out there so people can look at this a different way.
They certainly do, and we do have to remember there are real people who lost someone in the middle of this, but they deserve the facts as well. That's only fair to them and to the memory of their son as well. Dana
and Shannon, not to be preyed on by opportunistic filmmakers like this guy.
Yeah, you got to have more questions than answers with him right now. Dana and Leslie, good to see you both.
Good to see you.
Thank you,
Also,
Shannon.
quick
Good to
note
see
that
you.
Paul Ryan's going to join Martha later tonight, the House Speaker. First 100 days. Check it out at 7 o'clock Eastern Time this evening. In the meantime, John Scott's coming your way in 10 minutes. John, good morning to you.
Good morning, Bill. The Congressional Budget Office coming under fire from some Republicans today after it reported perhaps 24 million people would lose health insurance by next year under the new health care law. That's adding to the tough road ahead for the Paul Ryan-led legislation. Kevin Brady, one of the new law's biggest supporters, he is the chairman of the House Ways.
Sharing of nude photos of female service members by current and former U.S. male Marines. Jennifer Griffin's live at the Pentagon watching that. And story broke last week. How unusual is this hearing now, Jennifer?
Well, Bill, it's very unusual since it addresses an ongoing criminal investigation, but it shows how serious the Marine Corps and the Navy and legislators are taking this online social media scandal involving allegations of predatory behavior and sexually violent comments and images targeting female Marines. General Neller was supposed to be in Norway this week overseeing Marines taking part in NATO exercises. He's just deployed 400 Marines to Syria. He and the acting Navy Secretary had tough words moments ago for the active duty Marines and retired Marines whose behavior is deflecting the Marine Corps focus from those missions.
Discovery and investigation these past several weeks into the toxic predatory behavior harbored by the website Marines United has uncovered a grievous breakdown of good order and discipline, a violation of our core values, and what amounts to an insider threat.
I would ask to take this opportunity to speak directly to every female in our Marine Corps. I ask you to trust me personally as your commandant. And when I say I'm outraged that many of you haven't been given the same respect when you earn the title Marine.
General Neller pleaded with women who are affected by this scandal to come forward. He promised to protect him, but Senator Gillibrand just read him the Riot Act, saying that this was first brought to the Marine Corps' attention in 2013. Female Marines who I have spoken to who are victims of this behavior say the internet laws aren't strong enough to protect them. That's what they're hoping lawmakers address today, Bill.
Would you expect the women to come forward? Have any of them suggested they will?
I'm told about 10 have come forward so far, and it wasn't just nude photos, but these cyber stalkers took clothed photos, innocent photos from Marines' Instagram accounts when they were on vacation and posted them on the Marines United website. It called for sexually assaulting these women who have honorably served in the Marine Corps.
And hopefully we'll come up with something that's going to be really terrific.
And the weather affecting the plans to sell health care here at the White House. The president was expecting to have over members of the Freedom Caucus tonight to the Eisenhower Executive Office building, Shannon, for a little bowling, pizza, and some friendly arm twisting on health care. But because of all the snow that we've got here at the White House, that's going to have to wait until later on this week. Shannon?
That must be the most fun thing that got canceled in Washington, D.C., as you're dealing with all the cancellations there. All right. Now on to another story the White House is dealing with, the wiretapping story. Sounds like they're changing their position a little bit on this.
The press secretary yesterday
yesterday modified the position that the White House is taking on all of this just slightly. And the White House, by the way, hasn't been saying much on it. But the press secretary yesterday saying when the president initially set out his tweet about 10 or 11 days ago, the words wiretapping were in quotes, which the press secretary said could mean, well, not just wiretapping. He doesn't think that President Obama necessarily came up and put a tap on his phone, but it could refer to any one of a number of surveillance techniques, not just bugging somebody's phone. Though the president did send out 2 subsequent tweets to that one where the word tapping and tap, which was spelled T-A-P-P, was not in quotes. So we haven't yet heard from the president, Shannon, on exactly what he meant. He's been asked the question a number of times and continues to ignore the question every time it's asked. Maybe we'll get an answer one of these days, Shannon.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're going to stop asking. All right, Tom Roberts live at the White House. Thank you.
Also, DVR alert for the week. President Trump goes one-on-one with Tucker Carlson, 9 o'clock Wednesday night, only here on the Fox News channel. Going to be a really interesting interview, too, when Tucker and the president meet up in Michigan, so stay tuned for that.
I'm guessing Tucker may ask about the wiretapping. We'll see if we get a direct answer there. All right, well, coming up, House Speaker Paul Ryan says the CBO report, it's a little bit different than you may have heard about it, and he says it proves Republicans are on the right track.
If you read this entire report, I'm pretty encouraged by it, and it actually exceeded my expectations. This is just part 1 of a 3-part plan, and that's why I'm excited. Just this, they say, lowers premiums, stabilizes the market, gives people more choice and freedom.
But do the numbers tell the whole story? House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy is going to join us live to break it all down.
Also, it is called the Mar-a-Lago Summit. President Trump is expected to meet with the Chinese premier next month. Will the two see eye to eye on the critical issue that is North Korea? Stay tuned on that.
And their Hillary Clinton campaign now hitting back on claims that officials linked to her campaign also met with Russia's ambassador. An aide to Vladimir Putin says, this is his version of it.
If you look at it with intention to demonize Russia, you would probably see that, yes, he was trying to interfere in Hillary's activities. But it would be nonsense, because this is not true.
No. This, compared to the status quo, is far better. I'm excited about this analysis. And yeah, I think they sort of overestimate the uninsured number, just like they overestimated who would be insured by Obamacare. But I do believe that if we're not going to force people to buy something they don't want to buy, they won't buy it. And that's kind of obvious.
So House Speaker Paul Ryan saying on balance that CBO report is positive. It estimates 24 million fewer Americans would have health insurance over the next 10 years if this plan were to pass.